Hello and welcome. We're going to be talking about neuromaps and the Neurolimbic report that we provide to give laypersons introduction to what a brain map will look like, an EEG brain map. Well, it all starts with 19-channel EEG acquisitions. And what we're going to be doing is one of the ways we understand the EEG activities and how it corresponds with cerebral blood flow. And one of the things that we've known since the beginning of EEG, in fact, that slide, that image at the top is from the 50s, referring to the 1949 Maruzzi and Magoon paper where they stimulated the brainstem of a cat and they monitored the EEG. You can see you got the correspondence of behavior with the EEG. So it's the rhythm types that are very important, and we've been studying this now for 30 years and using the past to help us guide ourselves in the present in the cases we get to understand how to improve brainwave function and thereby behavior. All right, so it starts with a 19-channel amplifier, something such like this. This is the Discovery. I use also that. I use the Neuro Navigator. There are other amps out there. They are in essence guitar amps. It's like 19-channel guitar amps in essence, or 20-channel guitar amps. And we look at these 19 channels. This is the frontal pole. This is frontal. The F stands for where it is. This is over temporal. This is over the central. This is temporal again. This is parietal and occipital. Numbers on the left are extending. This is 0, the midline. It goes to the left, goes the higher numbers in the odd direction. To the right, it's the even direction. And we take any file, but I record usually with Neuro Navigator. Sometimes we get a lot of Discovery files, and anything that goes into EDF or anything that can make what's called a DAT or EDF file format. The analysis we use is the Kaiser Neuromap EEG technology one, which we call Net 5.0, and it can take this data and put it in here and start doing artifacting management and so forth. How you get the EEG channels from an individual, first you do is you measure the head for a cap, and as you get more experience, we pretty much know, looking at someone's head, what cap size they're going to use. There's only a handful of cap size. Often we'll find out the handedness. So this is a summary I had online years ago. What you do is you're going to prep each electrode site with this liquid sandpaper, I like to call it, new prep, that actually has a little grit to it, helps clean up if there's any dirt or dead skin layer below these ports, these electrode ports. The electrodes are inside those white circles there. You're using one of these medical applicators. And then we inject gel. That's not a sharp needle. That is a blunt needle. And it never touches the scalp. You inject gel into each of the locations. There's actually 20, the ground plus 19, and then you put the electrode on the ear as well. Check the signal, make sure it's going well, fix any signal not doing well by either doing more prep or putting an electrode underneath the cap and plugging it into the amp. That's why these amps always have these holes on top so you can plug them ones directly in. This is the ribbon cable connection. So it's just a cap put on your head. It only takes about 10 minutes to get the cap on. People will experience, maybe sometimes even less. And the recording itself is usually about 25 minutes. And here's the recording. We do eyes closed, resting state, and we just have you do mind wandering. Eyes open, rest. We have you look at painting, and we do this for 3 minutes at a time. We do this in triplicate. And then if you're adults and teens, we often will have them doing a brief 1 minute thinking about happy things and then thinking about stressful things, and often we end having them a second time thinking about happy things. And then we can take the cap off and we help clean them up. Okay, so there's all kinds of, the one problem with EEG, it's very sensitive to electrical activity, and there's all kinds of sources of electrical signal generation coming off the scalp of the head without being generated by the brain. The eyes can make a potential the muscle systems in the face and scalp can make signals, and there's all kinds of artifact that needs to be managed. So, for instance, this signal down here, that's an eye blink that's happened right there, and there's another eye blink right there. Wall socket, the 60 hertz or 50 hertz, if you're in a country where it's 50 hertz, can cause issues, but we know how to control that. Know how to manage it, know how to remove it. through the years. Well, there's also some, when we had like computational issues because the signal's coming down from deep within the cortex, maybe not that deep, usually just a few centimeters below each electrode. You see all this commonality, and we go from this is the recording, the referential montage, and we do this transformation because the signal is going out in all directions. We really don't want we're going to pick it up in all our electrodes, but we want to know where the signal is coming from. And that's why we do a source analysis called Raman montage, where we can now see what's going on. And you can see it's superior. Here's an example, the exact same data, looking at this referential montage and then some transformational ones, and finally getting down to this triangulation one. And you can see there's a little alpha wave down here that we didn't see in the surface or these transformations. And we get more insight of what's going on than if we use this source transformation. So that's what we use. And we take the data, the raw data, and we're going to compare it to statistics. Occasionally, I'm going to show you just the raw data because we can understand the raw data, but often the raw data is so complex, we need to convert it over to statistical analysis. What's the likely values we should see? And then plus or minus, we usually use two standard deviations. Anything above or below that is an excess or a deficit. And a lot of people you hear will use power. The reason why people use the EEG, some people use power in their EEG analysis is because in 1965 computers had trouble doing the square root function. They had trouble with we all use, in essence, when you do an EEG analysis, it's going to end up with a Pythagorean theorem, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Well, taking C squared and getting it down to C is a square root function, which 1965, this floating point operation took a long time, and so a lot of people left it in power. The people who actually sort of invented the fast Fourier transform also didn't care about central tendencies, they cared about variance. And power is a good measure of variance. But if you see someone doing a measurement in EEG power, you realize they're following a legacy they don't need to follow. It's just like for a while there, I used to have all my files have only 8 characters long because of DOS. Well, DOS doesn't exist anymore. Well, power, people using power, if they're using for central tendency, they're using something from 1965. You can see it's not normally distributed. We use magnitude, much more normally distributed. So when you use power and it's not normally distributed, and you do statistical comparisons, they're going to be off. And actually, it looks like neurophysics, the psychophysics of the brain is much more linear. So that's why you want to magnitude. Okay, I'm going to hold on to that one for a second. We're going to now go to a report. Okay, so this is an example of an individual who went through about 30 hours of default network training, DNT Neurotherapy, and she was 25, came in with anxiety, some depression, some childishness, and the first thing we do is we're going to find out the person's hand in this. That gets us on the rolling towards, we want to know, does she have reverse or typical hemispheres? In fact, I'm going to show you the report template before you start changing it to the individuals, so you see what's the possibilities. So the reason why I want to know the typical and reverse hemispheres refers to how the brain is organized. Typical organization means that the left hemisphere is the dominant hemisphere. That's the expressive hemisphere. It's the one you're speaking out of. The right hemisphere is the receptive hemisphere. It's going to handle novelty. The dominant one's going to handle familiar information. And so it doesn't change how we train an individual, but it will change how we interpret the findings, because if it's on the left side, we're going to think it's going to handle familiar situations, familiar topics. On the right side, more novelty. And we also look at perceptual dominance, because that tells us somewhat about the maturation of the person's brain. We all start off as right hemisphere perceptual dominance, and some of us, through our experience, our careers, become left brain. Some of us become more balanced, and it lets us understand, because people who are more left brain will be more into the details. Right hemisphere dominant individuals will be more into the holistic, and it helps us understand what language, in essence, to use to frame what we're saying to the person. Okay, so how do we find out if you have typical or reverse hemispheres? If we're doing it on the computer across Zoom or some communication system, we ask which face is happier here. And it's a quick and dirty test. I mean, it's not going to be 100% accurate. We would like them to say this hemisphere, this face is happier, because that means their emotional expressions are being perceived and understood in the right hemisphere, because the right hemisphere controls your left visual field. And here's, this is the sad eye, this is the happy eye, and that's why we expect them to say this is a happier one. If they give us a reverse answer, we usually then try to verify it. We can look at the map to see if there's any asymmetries in the map. We can also do what's called lateralized eye movement. One time I did it over Zoom by having the mother look at the teenager, and I asked questions, and you ask some verbal tough questions, and eventually they'll move their eyes in the direction that they move your eyes will tell you which hemisphere is being worked hard by the questions. So this is just, again, helps us the interpretation. Won't change how the where we put the electrodes, where we do the training, and most of the time we're training, everything's usually bilateral, so it's not going to make that much of a difference. But it does help us in understanding what's going on in the brain map. This is the perceptual dominance test. Very, again, quick and dirty, simple, get us there quickly. And this one's pretty accurate. If you can see this, you're right brain. If you can't, most people can't. Okay, so let's go look at this case we're looking at here. And okay, so this person had typical hemispheres. Left hemisphere is dominant, going to handle familiar. Right hemisphere novelty, new people, new situations typically. And it will show up sometimes when we're looking at the brain, that interpretation will be meaningful if one is showing a deficit on one side, not the other. Then it's going to help us understand when we explain it to them what we think the deficit is in. Okay, so we have a brief summary here. Now, the summary here is it has some level of helpfulness here. People a lot of times want to see encouraging things. Don't want to be discouraged, but sometimes, especially in the remap, you want to be encouraged. But the first map, you want us to find the problems. So there may be a lot of the yeses there are a sign that these things are in their more primitive, letting the reptile part of our brain come through. But we also have this positive thing, possible areas of strength. We have 4 areas here that may be strengths. And sometimes even the more reptile areas can be strengths, but they will be strengths only in the professional world, not the personal world, so personal life of that person. Okay, so what the summary is really is looking at their spectral plot and the dominant frequency table in particular. So first thing we explain is this dominant frequency table. We only care about this second row really, because the first row can have an artifact in it. We leave the first row there because sometimes you'll see if someone's very slow, they may have a peak below 7, like 6, but most people will not have a peak that low. Sometimes you'll see peaks well above, like they have a harmonic, a peak out there at 20 or 30 or 25 hertz or something, and that will show here. Also, but it is very sensitive to artifact, and that's why often the numbers are much down there in the low end in the delta range. So we really care about this, but this is the most important information. And this is a map that's only about 3 months apart, but they did 30 hours of training, and you want this to be consistent. This is 19 regions of the head. In fact, let me show you how we show the regions. We just show one hemisphere. We could show the other hemisphere, but there's 9 on one side and 10 on the left side, 9 on the right side, because on the left side we pull out Broca as well. That gives us the 10th area, 19 total. And those are the 19 regions right there. You can see the names for them. We would like this to be consistent first and foremost, and then second after that, we would like it to be around 10 and a quarter. Now, a lot of people, depending on where you are in your during your life, what age you are, you might be faster. There is this general, you might be slower if you're a child. This map, let me bring it in closer. This is actually real data. It's been smoothed by someone, but this is real individuals. We actually go from here's our ages down here. We head towards about 10 frames a second, 10 and a quarter approximately, and we get there on age 10, soon after age 10. We sometimes go faster than that for a while, and then there's this reduction back to the 10 and a quarter for most people. Now, it's like driving on the highway. Most of us will synchronize with the cars around us. A few will be like maniacs and drive much faster, or be stubborn or whatever and drive much slower. We do see that, especially in individuals who are having trouble, what you'd call sometimes pathological populations. Will they be going much faster or slower? And that means they're going to be having more obstacles in their communication because they are sampling the world at a different rate than most other people. So this is what this other map is trying to show here, this figure.